Hello, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be trying the one layer challenge, where pretty much, in digital art, there's a thing called layers, where you can draw on top of your drawing without interfering with what you've already drawn, pretty much. And I typically use a fair amount of layers. Most drawings use like 10-ish, I'd say, depending on how big or small it is. But in this video, I'm only going to be using one layer, which is going to drastically change my drawing process. If you think this video is interesting though, then make sure you go and watch another video after this. I have plenty of content and I'm sure many of you haven't seen all of my videos, so why don't you go watch some more after this. And on with the video. So I started with a basic drawing of my persona because that's what I tend to do for challenges. I'm sure y'all are sick of seeing me draw this character at this point because I've done it so much. But that's the point. It's something I'm comfortable with. I know the design well, so it's easy to test out different challenges using my persona. So my first thought was I was going to have no sketch and just start with blocks of colors and the shapes that I need, and then add line art on top of that with no shading at all. But when I started doing that, things weren't looking that promising. I realized that I need some sort of plan. So I decided I was going to sketch first, then put in the color blocks, and after that erase any sketch that was left showing, and then go back and forth between the coloring and the erasing and all that to make smooth lines. So it was going to take a lot more time, but I figured it'd be worth it in the long run to make the drawing actually look okay. Also, you'll notice that in this drawing I drew only on the left side. Originally I was planning to also draw on the right side a drawing on my persona and do a final drawing with the watercolor tool in Ibis Paint, because I typically use that tool when I'm trying to draw more realistic or painterly things. But when I use that tool, I usually only use one or two layers. So I figured I could try doing that, but I've already drawn with that tool before and created things with only one layer using that tool. So I figured it's not much of a challenge if it's already kind of how I use that tool. But that's why you will see me have this whole drawing to the left side. So one of the big things I learned from this test drawing is that anatomy is going to be a huge problem. The sketch helped out with it, but with the whole coloring process and then also the line art, things tend to change quite a bit from your original sketch. Things can get thicker, thinner, more displaced, and it's a lot harder to fix it and notice it without that line art from the get-go. So the shoulders are really hunched up and the whole body is off-center, but this isn't too horrendous in the anatomy department. Though I will say, something I rarely can say, the shoes actually don't look that bad. Even though I didn't add that much detail when I get to the line art stage, they don't look that bad. So I do have to pat myself on the back for that one. Then after putting all those color blocks down, I went through the tedious process of going back over the whole entire parameter of the sketch and removing every little tiny bit of sketch, which, typically consisted of me using an eraser smaller than a one size, so it wasn't even making complete lines, just so that it would mess with my drawing as little as possible. So it took a long time, but it was worth it in the end to get a better looking drawing, and it wasn't that bad of a process. There are a lot of areas where I had covered the sketch completely, so it wasn't too difficult. It was just time consuming. Also, I did simplify the eyes. Originally I was going to do my traditional eye style where you have the eye whites and then a pupil, and then there's some outlining there. But there is some like trouble doing that without any line art first. Planning out the shape would require me to start with the eye white, then the pupil, and then the line art, which is the least convenient way to create a good looking eye shape. And it's really hard for like the sharp angles in some of the parts of my eyes to like go back and forth and adjust the shapes. So I decided to just do like basic oval eyes to make this a bit easier, I guess. I don't know. I want it to look semi-presentable. Then after all that, I started with the line art, and I decided to go for pretty thick line art, so I didn't have any color outside of the lines, since it meant I could be a bit less precise with my line art and it still would work. There are a lot of wobbly lines though. I don't know why like using one layer suddenly made me worse at line art. I think it just felt like part of it was much scarier to erase things and more time consuming. I'd have to actually select a color and go over and then reselect colors instead of just clicking a button that swaps to the eraser tool. And then I think everything just felt a bit more permanent with one layer. So going back and undoing my lines, I don't know, it didn't occur to me as much. And I think the line art did just crowd the neck area more. But overall, the drawing's okay, it's kind of passable. But after this test, it was time to tackle a final drawing. I was gonna do a whole entire scene, it would have a background and all that. But I still wasn't gonna shade because that's out of my pay grade. So I decided I would draw my OC Peach, which I will address this. This reference image is on a separate layer, but I figured since like I could accomplish the same thing by like pulling up the reference image on my phone and holding it next to me, and it didn't like interfere with my drawing process in any way. I figured it technically wasn't cheating. Is it on a separate layer? Yes. But am I still drawing on only one layer? Yes. So I figured it still counts. It would have only been a slight inconvenience not to have it on there, but like, oh well. Oh, sorry, by the way, if you don't know, Peach is one of my original characters. I made a whole video talking about her, which, if I remember, I'll link in the iCard. And she has the ability to like interact with ghosts, so I want to do something related to that. So I could like mess around with transparency on only one layer, because what I would normally do would be draw like a fully opaque white ghost, and then on the actual layer I would change the opacity. But since I can't use multiple layers, that would be like an interesting hurdle to test out. So I originally planned like Peach playing soccer with a ghost. So I sketched out, and then I remembered that I had to draw a background, so this whole sketch was gonna be erased anyway. I just slapped down a basic blue sky and then some green grass, though that horizon line is so wobbly. Why did I like move on from that and not fix it? Then I started kind of planning out the drawing a bit. I didn't sketch this time because for some reason it felt a lot like I didn't want to mess with the background, even though it would have been like about the same amount of work to erase a sketch with that background. I don't know, it just seemed like more work to me in the moment, so I decided to just go without the sketch. And you know, anatomy is really hard when you don't sketch. It was already a problem in the other drawing with sketching, but like this one there were some struggles. Like lining everything up in a drawing when you have no plan, it's really difficult. And it's also really hard to like move things around with the transform tool, because that also messes with the background since they aren't on separate layers. So it's harder to line everything up, and it's harder to adjust things, which makes everything just fun and great. So I started off with the head, And I had some troubles with the proportions there of like forehead size and the hat size. And I did use the transform tool for that since it was all just in that blue area and I could just fill bucket it. So it ended up turning out fine, except her left part of her hair is a little off, but that'll only become more of a problem with the line art. And I kept those like simple eyes, but I gave a bit more dimension to them. Normally with my eyes, I'll add like a lighter gradient at the bottom and some darker shadow at the top, and then some highlights. So I did the same here, and I did a bit different of highlights than I normally do, but just tried to give them some more dimension in life. So the drawing would feel like more complete overall. And then the nose and the mouth and all that would come later when I'm doing line art. So right now, she doesn't have a mouth and it's gonna look a little weird, but it's fine. It'll return later. Then figuring out like the angle of the bat and the arms grabbing that's already a difficult task when you can sketch and like do layers and stuff. But with one layer, it's so much harder. Sue definitely got real wonky right off the bat. Oh my god. Pun not intended there. So the left arm was bent really badly. She has like no upper arm, just forearm or whatever it's called. Her elbow is so high up, but fixing that, since that was like one of the very first things I did, was gonna be a lot of work. So I like moved on for now. And then I had some trouble drawing her shirt because of all the angles around the arm, and her skirt also turned out a bit stiff, but overall the rest of the body was pretty easy to do. The arms were also still bugging me though, so I went back and I actually fixed it. It did take a bit of time, and now like the hand lining up on the bat is off, but I think it does look better like this. Also the angle of the bat is really weird, and I tried to think about how it was going through her hair there, because like it has to be going through her hair, but her hair isn't like bothered at all by that bat going through her hair. But we don't question it. Small details aren't important. Then I also drew her like button up to the side of her because I don't know, she's playing sports, it's gonna get heated, so she took it off. And then I drew the baseball, which you can clearly tell I don't exactly know how to draw it, but I tried. Then I lowered the brush opacity and drew some of the lines for the ghost. Its face is very wobbly. Actually, the whole ghost is very wobbly and derpy and non-symmetrical. Asymmetrical, that's the word. It looks really bad, but it's fine. It's a ghost. Of course, it's gonna be a bit wobbly. That's just how ghosts are. Then it was line art time, and I didn't want this line art to be as messy or thick as the other drawing, so I definitely had a lot of trouble keeping the colors in the lines. And whenever there was like a really hard area, I tended to just go over it and make that line a bit thicker to cover the bit of color that escaped the line. And there definitely still are some wobbly lines, especially at the beginning. But I think as I went through, things started getting more clean. Also, you can clearly see now with the line art that bat is like bending at 3 very distinct angles. And it looks so messed up. I also, for some reason, that shirt that was on the floor, I gave it like folds. I don't know, I never draw folds, but for some reason I gave this like a couple little folds here and there. Who knows, maybe I'm gonna start drawing folds and clothing pieces that people are actually wearing. Imagine if I actually did that. I don't know, folds are really scary to me, but for some reason like a couple of the folds on that shirt made sense to me, so I drew them. Then I lined the ghost, and the line art is still super wobbly. And then I realized I had no clue how I was going to line the baseball, because if I turned the opacity down, then the baseball line art will be slightly blue, but if I do it fully black, then and add like a white opaque layer on top, then like there's no way that I'm going to perfectly line up that white on only the line art of the baseball. So it's going to like overlap on the line art of the ghost or the like rest of the ghost's color and change the color of it. So I decided to choose the like blue line art option because it seemed like it would take less time. And like you can see it, but it's not that big a deal. And it was still looking incomplete, which is probably just because it has no shading. But I decided to help make it look more complete. I was going to do my classic grass texture. Can I just say, I hate drawing this texture. I don't know why I keep doing it. Because I have to draw hundreds and hundreds of tiny lines all across this huge space in a lighter green. And now I have the extra pressure of like having to avoid all the drawings while doing this. And then normally I also draw darker greens on top, so I have to do that twice. And then sometimes if it's still not looking right, I'll go back to that base green color and do another layer over the whole entire thing. So sometimes I'm drawing these tiny little lines, hundreds of them across the whole entire space, 3 different times. And this like oftentimes will have little areas that don't look great still, and every lawn looks like it's not mowed because even those hundreds of tiny lines are too long. So like the payout isn't that great, but it does make the drawing look more complete, so I went for it. I didn't do the darker green though, because no way I was going to do that more than one time. In some areas where it was looking a bit too heavy on the light green, I did go over it with a couple lines of the base green color, but that was it. Then for the area that had the ghost, I just selected that green color inside the ghost and lightened that and drew the tiny lines. Then I also added some clouds in the sky to try and fill the space a bit more. And then it was pretty much done. And you know, this isn't as bad as it could be. There's still a lot of issues, obviously, and it still doesn't feel that complete due to like the lack of shading, and there's some contrast problems, but it's pretty impressive for only doing it on one layer. Like, I genuinely like the drawing, and not just under the lens of it being a one layer drawing. I just like it overall. The concept's funny. I think the drawing of Peach isn't that bad. So, you know what? That's a win in my book. Anyway, if you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Also, comment down below how many layers you typically use if you're a digital artist. Because I know there are some people who use a lot of layers. Also, while you're down there, go to the description to find all my social media and make sure you follow them all. And I will see you all next week.